be careful that you're not posting content just for the sake of posting content. And that's kind of YouTuber fairyland. Like, make sure it's quality over quantity. But at some point, you got to put out content. I understand. There's going to be some episodes that are not as good as others, but just make sure that you're not just sitting down with no talking points and you're like, all right, got to do an hour today. You know, have
Yeah.
some ammunition when you sit down behind the microphone. And we've had at least one or two episodes where we recorded the whole fucking thing and went, that was ass.
Yeah.
We're not posting it, you know?
Yeah.
So just make sure that you've got some talking points, because we went into some with like some talking points that we thought might be okay, that we weren't super excited about, but
Hmm.
it was relevant at the time and ended up being shit.
Yeah.
So even if it's relevant, make sure that you're excited about it,
Yeah.
you know?
That was gonna be like another thing I just thought of was kind of like one thing you also want to do when making a podcast, or the best thing to do, is listen back to your own podcast, and you can go, okay, so that part was awkward because I did this, or like that part sounded bad because of this. So like recently, I've been listening back to a lot of our podcasts, and I realized that I sound kind of like sleepy, even though I've been awake for like an hour or two. So I've
Mhm.
kind of started to like wake up and like drink water immediately to kind of like refresh my throat, and then kind of like go out and get a coffee. So I kind of like, first of all, I'm forcing myself to go out, you know what I mean, become awake, and like getting the coffee to like stay awake.
Hmm.
And
I didn't
it
know
really
that.
just, yeah, I mean, just because like I feel like I've been sounding a lot groggier in some earlier podcasts, and it's like
Yeah.
I think that sounds like shit. You know what I mean? If I clicked on a podcast and someone was kind of like, "Hey, what's up, guys?" I'd be like, "Fuck that! That guy doesn't care." You know what I mean?
Yeah. The
Um,
energy and the voice is important to the podcast.
yeah, it's very important. Um, so yeah, I mean that's kind of the steps that I've taken, just kind of waking up, going outside, just kind of like becoming awake. You know, you don't want to just crawl out of bed, move over to your PC and like hit record. You want to make sure that you're into your own conversation. You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
want to be the podcast that you would want to listen to.
for sure. Yeah. That's another t-shirt. We got
So
mad
I mean,
t-shirts,
seriously
bro.
though, that's like people that like if you make podcasts and if you don't go back and listen to them to see the quality and to see what you can change, I think that's a big problem, and I think that's something that everyone should be doing. Um, just kind of just
Yeah.
quality assurance. You know what I mean? You don't want to be
And when you
recording
listen,
trash and then forcing it down people's ears.
my bad, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I
But
got you.
when you listen to your own podcast again, it's so much different than just speaking,
Yeah.
because you don't realize what you sound like when you're speaking. It's weird. When you
Hmm.
listen to yourself, it's like you said, oh, I sound groggy. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do that. And by listening, I listen to it. I have to, because I'm the one that edits the podcast, you know. So I get to hear like, oh, this I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do that, and you are listening to them when they get posted, you know.
Hmm.
So then every episode becomes better, and I kind of wish that you, maybe you do, I don't know, because you can get the raw recording straight from Skype. If you listen to the uncut version, it might even be better because you're not hearing the stuff that I've cut out on the YouTube version, you know.
Yeah.
And so every podcast gets better and better and better when you listen to yourself, because it's practice, you know.
Yep.
And it's just like I've heard some people like Joe Rogan has recorded so many podcasts that he is on cruise control at this point. He's just so good at it, you know.
Yeah. He can just talk and like that's a podcast. You know what I
Or
mean?
like Alex Jones can just talk and talk and talk and talk with no teleprompter by
Hmm.
himself in a room and just go. And I'm not saying I agree with what Alex Jones says, but you got to respect the way that dude can speak and speak and speak and speak and be interesting, you know, for hours.
I've always said this, like, you know, I don't agree with Alex Jones, but he is a showman and he
Yeah.
is good at his craft. Um, so pretty much that's kind of what you want to aim for. You know what I mean? Just kind of just being ready, because those guys have done like so like they've done like thousands, right? Joe Rogan's done thousands of interviews, and
Oh
then
yeah.
Alex Jones has done like thousands of videos. So at this point, they're just kind of it's repetition for them. It's second nature.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's kind of what we're striving for. I think listening back to ours, I think we're like very ahead of it compared to like you know what I mean where we were at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's because like the steps we're taking. You know what I mean? We're watching videos on YouTube like how to record a podcast better, what software to use that's better. You know what's like
Hmm.
we're kind of just like we're kind of like what's the next step every time we make another podcast, and like we're trying
Right.
to expand more and more and more every single podcast. And
So
I think doing that really will change your way you look at podcasting, and like will change kind of because you are also running a business. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
By having a podcast. I think
Be
if you want to do
marketable.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. If you want to do a podcast, make sure you're not just putting sounds in the airwaves. You know what I mean? Make sure that you are trying to get better and that you're trying to put out good content.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me around to what will probably be our final talking point, just for the sake of time, is watch podcasts that you want to be like in terms of success. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not saying be just like the H3 podcast or be just like Joe Rogan. They're already doing that. There's
Mhm.
already someone doing that. You can't do it again, you know.
Yeah.
It's probably unwise to try to do it again. I don't know. You might be able to do it again. But watch someone that can command attention or speaks confidently or is interesting and be like, oh, how does he speak? What's the body language like? What's his meter and his voice? You know, things like that. I'm not saying replicate it exactly, but you can learn from that. Sometimes it'll be someone that I don't even like,
Yeah.
but I understand the talent and I know that I can learn from it. You know, so find someone that speaks well or the way that you want to speak or is able to speak to guests that are far more famous than them or something, but do it confidently. Good interviewers, you know, watch those people, figure out how they speak and learn from that, you know.
hmm
That's
Yeah. I mean,
kind of what
that's a
I do.
great way of summing it up.
I mean, a good place to start is, I say this so fucking much, but a good place to start is honestly the Joe Rogan podcast. He speaks to so many different people that like you'll find out how to interview a rapper, you'll find out how to interview a football player, you find out how to interview a scientist. Like he talks to all these different people and he's able to change his interview style between them, you know.
Yeah.
So
Um.
especially if you're going to have guests, his is a fantastic one to learn from.
Yeah. I would say listen to like a handful of podcasts, but make sure that they're all different. You know what I mean? You don't want like to be listening to the same genre of podcast. You want to make sure that you are listening to different like different like shows. You know what I mean? Like because
Hmm.
most of the ones that I listen to are like either interviews or like YouTubers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But before I started this, I was kind of listening to like all different kinds of podcasts to kind of see like who I want to emulate. You know what I mean? And
Right.
who does it the best, and like who you kind of like what you said, like the listen to the podcast that you want to be similar to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who like you like their style, and like you want to like kind of not replicate it, but kind of like you want to take that same energy that they have and kind of like implement it into your own.
Yeah, like a really solid one. I think I mentioned it earlier. That is just It's one dude, no co-host or anything like that. Is Chris D'Elia. His podcast it's hilarious, and it's just him. You know, super
hmm
high energy. I watch his maybe once a week or so, and just to see his energy. You know, how does he talk to his? He talks directly to his audience. You know, he calls his audience his babies. He's like, "What's going on, my babies?" You know, so he's speaking directly to his audience. He maintains this very high energy throughout the entire podcast, you know.
Yeah.
So I learned from him in that way as well.